I remember thinking the game was broke as a child. Like, you guys have to understand, no internet, only child, in the basement, one of 5 games, and there's just the despair. Just the despair and hopelessness of like, I can't get out of here. Who am I gonna? If I called someone, no one would care anyways.
Hello and welcome to the TwinCast pod. We are a podcast where we pick up an old video game, dust it off, turn it around in our hands, and try to ascertain if it holds up today. My name is Clark, and joining us for our esteemed panel today is Cam, who has promised if we finish recording this episode in less than 2 hours, he will come decked out in his Speedo for the next one. How are you this fine evening, Cam?
Great. I'm really excited to talk about this game, and I will have my bikini top too. So.
Oh, okay. A little more modest. Great.
Yes.
Also joining us is Trevor, who when he hatched, Cam and I were there, and he hasn't stopped following us around since.
Yeah, like a parasitic Metroid. I've just been sucking everything from them ever since. So,
Yep. How are you today, Trev?
I'm doing all right.
Good, good. Glad that you're here. And finally, joining us for the first time, we have Matt Superbomb Maximus. I won't go into detail how he got that nickname, but I will welcome you to the pod. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good. It's good to be with you guys. I have company.
Oh, yeah.
This is Dottie. You may see her coming across the screen, but I am also excited to talk about this game, as it was like one of 5 that I owned back in the day.
Yeah. So, as you guys can probably tell from our conversation up to this point, we're talking about a certified classic today. We're talking about Super Metroid. Before we kick off that discussion, though, I do want to take a moment to let you know how you can engage with the show better. What we do is we pick a game every month, and we have sort of a game club style show where we play through that game, kind of do a deep dive on that game, and then we discuss it with an expert panel. So next month, we're going to be discussing King's Quest V. I encourage you to sort of pick that up between this episode and the next one, and then engage with us on that. So use the comment function on YouTube, or just email us on twincastpod@gmail.com and let us know your feedback. So with that being said, let's kick off this game. This game came out in 1994, which is basically the very last year of the Super Nintendo, and you can tell they were just wringing the most out of the hardware at this time. This game looks and sounds and plays fantastic. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The developer of this game is Nintendo, specifically a division of Nintendo called R&D1, and programmed by Intelligent Systems. It was done by a staff of 15 people, believe it or not, that was managed by the legendary Gunpei Yokoi. And then
It's hard to believe it was done by just 15 people.
I know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Here's a little bit nugget, Matt, that I think that you will enjoy. The opening was narrated by Dan Osen, a Nintendo of America employee.
You mean it wasn't a
wow.
professional voice actor?
Nope.
He's probably just some guy down, like, stuck their head out and like saw that guy and had him come in and do it for like nothing.
Yeah, he's like a janitor. Hey, come in here real quick.
We got to find out. You got to find a way to drop that sample into the pod so people can hear that.
I'll splice it in right now.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
Okay. Finally, the music for this game was composed by Kenji Yamamoto and Minako Hamano. So great stuff all around, great game. So let's kick off this discussion here with some questions. And the first question I have for Trevor. Trevor, how would you describe this game to someone from Gen Z?
So I would say it's about a hunter who goes uninvited into habitats of rare animals and destroys them. destroying rare fauna on alien planets. You're killing every animal that you can possibly get your hands on. No, I would describe it as action platformer. And there are a lot of games. I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go on. But there are a lot of games I think that people can draw from their experience, modern game wise, to understand what this game is doing.
Yeah, in fact, that's my follow-up question is, like, are there any contemporary games today that, like, that Gen Z might play that you would draw comparisons to?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Hollow Knight kind of stands out to me. They're obviously different. They're not like this totally the same, but if you like Hollow Knight, you might like Metroid, Shovel Knight, some other ones that are a little bit more indie. I guess Celeste is kind of like a action platformer with a heavy story. So I'd point out some of those games, yeah. So definitely, yeah. I mean, it's a genre that is still alive today.
Yeah, and speaking of this genre that's still alive today, Matt, next question for you is, like, do you see an influence of this game today? Because I know you play a lot of games and that you're very plugged into the gaming industry. Do you see its influence still?
Yeah, and Metroidvanias are I kind of feel like they're a niche. Like, I was blown away that Metroid Dread it was the highest selling Metroid of all time, and it was 3 million copies.
Yeah, it's
and
so
like
weird.
all of the people on the subreddits and all of the mega fans like us are like, oh my gosh, please keep making these. I'm worried they won't keep making these because that's such a low number for Nintendo.
Yeah.
And so, like, I feel like the Metroidvanias as a whole is kind of really a niche thing, but it's a big niche, like a big cult following.
Yeah, I mean, Dread was awesome, but I have a feeling that a lot of people from, like, Gen Z down probably mostly know Metroid from, like, Super Smash Brothers, right? They see Samus in that game and they play Samus, and which is obviously nothing like the game itself. So
no.
Cam, where does this game sort of fit into the whole Metroid universe?
Oh, the whole Metroid universe. Well, I mean, this is when you start up the game, it says Metroid 3, right? So there were 2 games that were before this one, Metroid and The Return of Samus, and then this one. But if you're going by chronological order or whatever, then you have the Prime series that takes place after the first Metroid game. And then you have this one, then you have the Game Boy one, and then this one. And where it fits in as far as legacy goes is a lot of people will say that this is the best Metroid game. And if you ask me, it's probably the best Metroidvania I've ever played. I like Metroidvanias. I'm not like a expert on them, but to me it's the best Metroidvania that there is. So I mean, I'm giving away the goods right now. If I'm gonna slot this, it's the best in the whole series. So
yeah, I mean, Dread gives it a run for its money. I think there's some quality of life improvements from modern Metroid-like games, but as far as, like, the way it stands up, it's to me, it's crazy that it stands up as well as it does, and it's still so good. So we'll dive into that a little bit. So before we move on from this, any final thoughts here about what this game is, its legacy, before we kind of dive into the nitty gritty of some of this stuff?
I guess one of the things, like, you got to think about that isn't a thing now. Like, there's so many systems, there's so many subscriptions, there's so many games. It's like you can not even know a really good game exists these days because there's so many. But back then, this was kind of almost like the third or fourth home console there was, and that there was like the regular Nintendo that Cam's got behind the Super Nintendo, and then there was regular Game Boy, and that's where the second one of the series went. And so it's like, it was kind of niche in the beginning, and then it was even more niche when it was like a screen this big, and then the third one, like, you really had to be faithful to buy all the systems to, like, stay up on it.
Well, and like Clark said, this one actually came out right in 1994 when the SNES was kind of tailing off and was beginning to move towards the N64. So some people may have missed out on this game if they've had already given up on the system too. So, which is too bad.
Yeah. And what's cool, to build off what you were talking about, Matt, is there's a real narrative thread here they introduce it. They have a little cinematic at the beginning that ties it back to the Game Boy game and the original game. But yeah, there's some real DNA that carries it through on this game. Let's actually talk about real quick our past experiences with this game. So, Cam, we'll start with you. How were you introduced to Super Metroid?
Well, I was introduced to this from our friend Tim, who had a Super Nintendo, because we didn't have a Super Nintendo growing up. So we would go over to Tim's house and watch Tim play this game. Now, we had experience with the other Metroids, so I knew what was going on, and I remember sitting and watching him play just like an awesome version of these other games that we had already played. So, I mean, we were 11, 12 years old at this time, so it's not like I had a great idea of like what really was going on, but I just remember the atmosphere of this game and how it just sucked me in as I would watch him play for little bits at a time. And unfortunately, I never really watched him play all the way through it when we were growing up, but it always left an impression on me, especially that first scene when he would boot it up. That kind of thing just seared in my mind.
Yeah.
So I have, even though I never really played through it myself when we were younger, this scene right here that plays at the beginning, it's really nostalgic for me. So.
Yeah. Matt, let's go to you next. What are your experiences like early in your life with this game?
So I was actually big fan of Metroid 1 on NES, and it felt so different. And like, I guess as I was 10, I don't know what year that was. I would have probably been even younger, maybe 7 when the NES
88.
came out. Yeah,
88.
and so like as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, I thought that it was like super adult and like.
Were you
super
even able to
gritty.
get very far into that game?
I sucked at it, and the controls were really tough in that early one, and that's why they remade 1 and 2 so many times, is it had better controls and better graphics. But I remember thinking how awesome it was, how hard and confusing and like difficult it was, and also for the second one and Game Boy. So when this came out, I was like so excited. I was a Nintendo Power subscriber, so I like knew that it was coming. Like I was checking the mailbox every day for the Nintendo Power magazine that had this article. I think it was a cover, and I was so excited.
I think I can picture that cover in my mind's eye right now, it was a really cool cover.
You should put it in right here.
Yeah. T, did you have any early memories of this game?
I've never played this game before. This is the first time I had ever booted it up. So I was kind of excited because I have played some of the other Metroid games off and on throughout all the series. So I'm not one of those loyal fans who's been following the story from the beginning, but I have been exposed to Metroid games. So it was cool to boot this up for the first time, knowing that this was lauded as possibly the best Metroid game in the series.
What was the first one that you played?
Fusion
on the Game Boy
Advance.
Advance.
A good one too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a really good one.
I really enjoyed it. I remember having a really good time. I think I 100%ed that game, found all the stuff, and it had some references to story that I didn't understand, and so I was always kind of curious. I mean, I was playing that game when I was I don't know, 10 or 11, and so I didn't really have the means to go out and figure out what was going on. So anyway, I've always kind of been curious about the overall story of the Metroid universe.
So you playing that game would have been about the same age that we would have been playing this game. So, yeah, I feel for you.
Well, it was much more streamlined than the first Metroid was, for sure.
Oh yeah.
I mean, my experiences are much like Cam. Just to add to it, I played the first game, or watched a lot of people play the first game, and just found it really archaic. We never owned it, but I remember going over to a friend's house, and like it was just, all of the corridors were very samey, and it was very easy to get lost, even though it's like a quarter of the size of Super Metroid. It's just not as well laid out because everything looks the same. We also had the Game Boy version, though. That's what we kind of cut our teeth on. I remember we would take these 3-hour trips up to our parents' cabin up at Bear Lake, and we would be riding in the bed of the truck. We had like a camper shell over the
It was so bad.
of the truck, and so we would like be like laying down in the back of the truck between like rows of luggage because we were heading up there to stay for like the week.
just burning through AA batteries on your Game Boy.
Yeah.
Well,
Just like burning.
it didn't burn it as fast as our Game Gear, but
That was crazy for a little screen this big.
yeah.
So that would have been Metroid 2,
Yeah,
right?
that was
you guys were
Metroid 2. So
playing?
we played that game. So yeah, I just remember playing it on the way up and then at the cabin. And so we were very familiar with that game. And then I do remember when going to Tim's house, and I think that our friend Weston also had that. And I remember watching it, Weston. I remember watching the last battle and realizing that like, oh, hey, this connects to the end of Metroid 2. Because at the end of Metroid 2, that's what stands out the most about that game is you destroy all the Metroids except for this little baby that hatches at the end, and it follows you, and that comes into play at the end of this game. So that's my experiences with this game up to this point. So, all right, Cam, let's dig into this game a little bit here. So playing through it here in the year of our Lord, 2024. How did Super Metroid's atmosphere, like today, affect your experience playing the game?
Well, as I mentioned before, the thing that stuck in my mind from when I experienced this game when I was younger was the atmosphere, the beginning of it and everything. And to me, atmosphere is almost everything in this game.
Can you point to anything specific like that builds atmosphere in this?
Well, just the opening scene, right? You see the little baby Metroid there in the middle, and then the dead scientists off to the side, and you get that awesome music that comes in, and that gives you that twinge of like creepiness, and it gets you excited to see, oh, what's going on here? There's these dead scientists next to the baby Metroid.
And then in just like 10 minutes when you play the game, you actually go into that spot, and it's the Metroid is like its containment facility thing is cracked and it's gone. And so your first inclination is like, oh, it escaped and it attacked the scientists, right? That's what you think when you first get there. Of course, that changes when you get through it, right?
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll hit more of that story stuff when we talk about the story. But when you go back to Zebes, and is that how you say it? Zebes. When you first get out of your spaceship, it's like it's got that creepy. It's not. There's not much going on. You hear the thunder, and the atmosphere just builds. And then as you go down into it, and you go to the place where you fought Mother Brain in the first game, that I every time I would walk past there, when I would try to play through this game, that always gave me the little like, ooh, that's where you killed Mother Brain in the first game. So it's just little details like that make me excited every time I boot up this game. And even the first item that you get in this game is the first item that you get in Metroid 1, and it's in the same spot. And just little details like that just get me pumped.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I agree with everything you said there. One of the interesting things in this game is like this came out in an era where there are a lot of like JRPG games were kind of getting big. I know we play a lot of JRPG. The game's really text heavy, really story heavy. This game doesn't have any of that. It doesn't have really any dialogue as you're playing through the game. Do you think that helped or hurt this game?
Oh, I think the lack of dialogue helps this game. So, I mean, you get a little bit of text at the very beginning when you find out about what kind of happened in the other games, and about how Samus is going to take the baby Metroid to the space station. Then she leaves, and then she receives this distress signal, and she comes back. But Other than that, there's no other text in the whole game. Nothing is conveyed. Everything is conveyed through things that happen on screen, and I'm here for that because it's easy on you. You don't have to read, and it tells a great story. And
Yeah, to me, it makes you
I love
feel a
that.
little bit more like Samus because Samus is here isolated in this alien world. She doesn't have anyone to communicate with, so why would they put text on the screen? So, I mean, a lot of this is just an example of environmental storytelling, right? So that's actually my next question for you, Trevor, is how does Super Metroid use environmental storytelling?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and this is going to sound strange, but I almost compare it to Metal Gear Solid 5, if any of you have played any of that, where the story is not, and it's very uncharacteristic of a Metal Gear Solid game, the story is not given to you. It's really there for you to discover as the character is discovering it, and a lot of those things aren't very explicit. And so that is a cool thing to some people, and it's a bad thing to other people. And I really think it's just kind of like, what's your flavor there? The story in this game, like Cam said, is just all environment. It's bosses, it's characters that you're fighting, and so it really rewards being involved with the series for a long period of time. And that's something that I wasn't. I haven't been involved with the series that much. And so I found it kind of hindered my I shouldn't say it hindered my understanding. It kept me from diving deeper into the game than I think I could have otherwise if I had been in the context of this game when it came out. That said, the environments are very cool. You do feel emotions every time you get into these environments. The boss fights are fun. And we've already mentioned that opening sequence, but that opening sequence is classic. When I think it was Cam booted it up with that the dock on the TV. My immediate thought was like, this feels like a movie. Like, it was so atmospheric, and the music was cool, and it felt like and I mean this in the best way, it felt like a B movie, like alien horror movie, and I mean that as a compliment. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Really great points. One of my favorite examples of just environmental storytelling in this game is you come across this area that is so random. It's so disconnected from the rest of it. It's just a crashed ship. And you go into the crashed ship and it doesn't tell you anything about the crashed ship. Like you are just there to try to like figure out like, well, is this like a science vessel that came down to try to explore this planet? Like, what is going on here with this ship? And all the power is turned off when you first get there, and you're trying to open the doors and you can't, and it just leaves it all to mystery, right? And maybe Matt, this for you, like I was taken back because I didn't realize that there were Metroids early in this game, and you get attacked by a Metroid. I can't remember which area it's in, but like a Metroid comes attacks you, but it's a weak Metroid. And
Yeah, it's weird.
yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of things that you could maybe take from that too. Like, well, okay, maybe these. By the way, there's a name for those Metroids. They're called Mocktroids. And
I didn't know that.
yeah, and to me, it's just a perfect example of environmental storytelling because, to me, this at least the story that I tell in my head, like this was the space pirates' attempts at bringing Metroids back because Metroids were supposedly wiped out. So before they went and stole the baby, they had experiments to try to bring these Metroids back, but they were failed experiments. And now you get to fight these failed experiments that are just really weak Metroids. And this is all things that, you just infer or you fill in the gaps yourself as you're playing the game.
Yeah, and it's even more impressive in hindsight when you realize that like this was such a tiny canvas they had to work with the limitations of the hardware at the time. Like they really put the most out of that hardware into this, where it's just like even the volumetric fog, and it's kind of like I think that like in games like Alien Isolation today that everyone loves for like the atmospheric horror, kind of like pays like this was what it started as and really done right. And like one of the things like what Cam was saying is that very first place you land and there's like no one there, that is like a great world building. Like you're literally bored. You're like shooting against the wall. There's nothing for you to shoot. There's nothing for you to do. and that first scene where it shows Ridley. That I don't know if that was. I kind of feel like this was the one that started that trope of you get to the end of the first level, there's a boss you literally can't beat. They'll once you trigger your life to this point, they fly off. You fail in the first thing, then the ship destruction. I feel like was like copied a million times, where you had a timer that counted down for you to get out of there. I kind of feel like this was the first to do it.
Well,
But
the original Metroid
first
kinda
level, they've just
Oh
got you.
yeah, I mean the first Metroid did that at the end of the game. I guess this is the first time at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of feel like a lot of that was lost too after this game. It's really sad. It was like Super Nintendo was over after this. It went into Nintendo 64, and I hated Nintendo 64. The early 3D was bad. I hated that controller, and it ruined stuff like this.
This is like the pinnacle of the 2D
I know.
era, right? Yeah.
I know, and early 3D is so bad. I mean, it had to be done. The 3D today owes it to that. Nintendo's either way ahead of its time or fails miserably. Like they kind of do one or the other. They're not afraid to take risks, but the Nintendo 64 Metroid, like they couldn't make it like this because it was like a rule that it had to be 3D. And so they went with this first person shooter, and all of that just, I feel like it got lost.
Yeah. I really like some of the things you said there about the storytelling and the limitations that they had with it. I kind of wish we saw this more today because, I mean, the story is serviceable in Dread. I liked it, but honestly, I think I prefer the approach here. What's the term show, don't tell? Like, this game is the pinnacle of show, don't tell. Like, it shows you everything. It doesn't take time to explain it, and you fill in the gaps. And for, like, a game that is trying to put you in a mood, it's awesome that way.
Perfect.
There's a lot of indie games that do that well nowadays. I mean, a lot of the AAA games don't do that, but a game like Limbo, who has a ton of atmosphere, I feel pulls a lot from things like Metroid.
Yeah.
So,
I want to pull on one of the threads that you kind of brought up, Matt, about some of the things that this game probably started. A lot of people look at this game as the beginning of the Metroidvania genre that we talked about earlier. So let's kind of stop and focus on that for a little bit. What did this game do that was new and exciting at the time that we could see the influence till now?
So this was, you got it. So speaking of hardware limitations, the reason that you have different colored doors in Metroid is the homage to the original. It's like, we only have the ability to swap this color. This is a blue door. This is a red door. You need a missile to unlock the red door. So they could only do so much with that Metroid style. It was just a Metroid style. And a lot of the games on regular Nintendo were like just kind of linear. And so this was kind of the first one that like introduced 2D platformer where you had diverging paths. You chose where to go. One side you could get to, and if you went far enough on the other side, you needed a special item to unlock it. And so this was, I'd say, like the very first one to do it really, really fun and exciting, where you had to remember where you would backtrack to. And then I would say that the next one that did it right was Symphony in the Night. And that's like considered, one of the top S tier that there is still to this day. It still holds up just like Super Metroid. So then they took Castlevania and Metroidvania, merged it into one, which is Metroidvania. But Castlevania games were more like Mario before they came out with Symphony in the Night. And that's like really was a change for Castlevania games to take this genre on. So that's why the name comes from and how they merged it all together.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I thought that this game did better than any other game up to this point is there were other games like this, but this game presented it in a way that made you excited. You're like, oh, there's a missile container up there. How do I get that missile container? And you have to think, well, it looks like the only way I can get that is maybe if I run really fast and do that super jump thing. So it gets you like thinking about how you can do the next thing and go or open the next door. Because you early on you find out there's more than just the doors that can be opened by missiles on this one. There's super missiles. There's the yellow ones that can only be opened up by the power bombs. So I just think this game just does it like the best. It dangles that carrot in front of you and keeps you pushing forward, trying to explore the whole world and get the whole ambiance of the game.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you guys have said. One thing I want to add to is, I mean, I guess I don't know. I can't look back at all of the games before this, but from what I can see, this is the first game to have a real functional map. Like, it's not a perfect map, but it has a really functional map and built into the game. And you can see that a lot of future games adapted that, improved that map. But it was huge at the time. Like, not to have, I remember there were games I had graph paper out when I would like be playing the game, drawing my own maps. Like, it was such a quality of life to see a map. The only thing that I kind of, well, we won't go into all of the downside of the map. I wish it would mark off things as you picked them up or whatever. But it was just huge to be able to see where you've been, where you're going, and spots would be gray out where you haven't been to, and you would just instinctively know, well, I haven't been there. There's a tile there on the map. I can get there somehow. How do I light up that tile?
Yep. Another one of those carrots to keep you moving forward.
Yeah. Well, speaking of navigating the map, let's just dive into how we approached to navigating Zebes. So, Cameron, you mentioned that this was kind of your first time playing through it. What was your approach to going through this game?
Well, I made a conscious decision this time that I wasn't going to use any guide. So I went into this closing all my browser windows, and I played this on my analog pocket. So I would sit in bed and I would just play and just go where I wanted the original experience, like what would have happened if I had played this back in 1994, where there was no maps or no internet to help me, and I just explored. Obviously, I had a little bit of help, but Clark and our friend Tim would tell us a few things, and I'd be like, oh yeah, because I would every once in a while struggle with how to wall jump, because wall jump's not intuitive in this game. I'd get stuck in some places, and I'd be like, oh, and I would message Tim, and he would tell me a little bit of stuff. But for the most part, I just explored this organically, and what I did was what you said with the map. I'd bring up the map, and I would see where I haven't explored, and go over there. And if I could get to it with the resources I had, then I would keep on exploring until I reached a dead end. Then I would go and try to find the key that unlocked the next area. So that's basically what I did.
Well, it sounds like you did get stuck a few times. Did that affect your experience? Like, were you frustrated?
A little bit sometimes. Like, specifically the area where you had to wall jump. The way you wall jump in this game is not intuitive, especially if you're used to how modern games wall jump. So I sat there and for maybe 10 or 15 minutes trying to get the wall jump, because you get going and you might get one or two, and then if you just mess up once, you fall all the way down. So there's a section in the game where there's an energy tank, and you run over to try to get the energy tank, and there's a false floor, and you fall through the floor. And if you fall through that floor, and you're early enough in the game, you don't have the high jump, the power jump, you have to wall jump to get out of there. And that's what happened to me. I was exploring in that area maybe a little too early. But, I mean, there's some helpful creatures there that show you, like, hey, look, you're supposed to wall jump. I'm like, okay. Yeah, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to wall jump here. And it took me 15 minutes to get out of that. And that was a little frustrating.
Yeah.
So...
I like how you talk about doing this as a pure experience, but your experience was probably still quite a bit different than little Matt's experience, because Matt, you had Nintendo Power to help you, right? So
yeah, I had the one that was like hyping it, but I don't think that there was like a real guide for this, because I will say, like, outside of that one instance, I know what you're talking about, Cam. I remember thinking the game was broke as a child. Like, I mean, you guys have to understand, no internet, only child, in the basement, one of 5 games, and there's just the despair. Just the despair and hopelessness of, like, I can't get out of here. Who am I going to... If I called someone, no one would care anyways. And for a time, I was one of the only ones that I knew that had a Super Nintendo. It was a pretty big flex to have back then, honestly,
Yeah.
especially in like 92.
Yep.
And so nobody had it. There's no one to call. And that's when you like started to notice like the animation, like one frame of animation on it. And the map, the map is kind of crappy. The map is kind of a crappy minimalist map. And
Compared to maps today, for sure.
yeah, and I don't know if it was by design or they just kind of like didn't really have the juice and the memory to make it anything other than that.
Well, I want to throw this over to you too, Trev, just because you coming to this game that's, I guess, came out 2 years before you were born. Did you find it frustrating at all, navigating through it?
In some ways, so I did the exact opposite of Cam. So I've been trying to have the pure experience for the previous games that we've been playing and not touch a guide at all. And I did find myself getting frustrated with those games at times. And so you guys last podcast suggested I try a guide for this one, so I did. And I did the IGN walkthrough. The first couple pages are good, but then like some other author takes over. And I was sitting there at times, I was like reading what the guide was saying and then like trying to like map it to like what was going on my screen. I'm like trying to decipher what's going on in this guide. And so that was the most frustrating part. I probably should have just avoided a guide for this one. As far as like map exploration, I knew what to expect. Playing Fusion first and going back to this, Fusion does everything that Super Metroid does well, and then it adds some time and experience to it. So despite knowing that Super Metroid was, at the time like the cream of the crop, it still felt like a step backwards for me. Just having experienced it. That said, I knew what to expect as far as exploration was concerned. And so I knew how easy it would be to get lost searching for all of the side items. I knew how easy it is to think you're going the right direction when you're not sometimes. And so I think I was emotionally ready for those moments and able to kind of keep it together. When otherwise, I think I would have been a lot more frustrated if I hadn't been familiar with kind of that feeling.
You knew the Metroid trick of just bomb every single wall.
Yeah,
just bomb it.
That's exactly that's what I would do. Like when I don't know what's going on, I just start bombing around all the walls. That's exactly
Yep.
Classic.
Time-tested advice for this game. So, well, speaking of bombs and upgrades, as you were progressing through this game, Trev, did you have any abilities or upgrades that you felt were the most satisfying to unlock?
I think Screw Attack holds a special place in my heart. You just feel really good, kind of bounce around the screen, making people die. So I like that a lot. I will say a complaint that I have is, despite the upgrades and despite how cool they seem initially, I never felt like they affected gameplay all that much for me. It just kind of affected where I could go on the map. So when I got these things, I didn't feel like it added a lot of variety. It just kind of added new places to go and different enemies. So in that regard, there was some variety. But I never really felt like the upgrades changed the game for me. So that was kind of a gripe that I had, is that I didn't feel personally that there was a lot of variety from beginning to end beyond different biomes with different enemies.
Well, what about you, Matt or Cam? Did any of the upgrades stand out to you?
I think the ultra sprint is where you like really start to feel it open up. That great sprint, and that's one of the things that like I guess is way more simple about this game versus other Metroidvanias, like Symphony of the Night, is that you have equipable items in those other games that really changes the experience. And this, you're just the main like 5 items.
Yeah,
that you unlock.
It's pretty narrow. What I like about the sprint that you brought up is, that sprint is really one of the ways that you can actually sequence break in this game. And you could tell that the developers knew that you could sequence break with this game with that ability. And
what do you mean? What is sequence break?
Sequence break is where you use abilities that allow you to complete the game out of order. So, like, technically, you can pull up videos on, and they're pretty crazy on YouTube, of people playing this game and beating the game in reverse boss order. So they start with Ridley, and they beat Ridley first. And then they go all the way back and beat Kraid
Oh wow.
last. And these are all done through legitimate, like they're not hacking the game or anything like that. They're using like tricks of the game to get through it. And the part where they're like going through the lava to go into Ridley's lair is like intense. Like to watch them do that.
So to say they would probably die a lot of the time in the lava. They gotta be really good.
But that's an extreme example of sequence breaking. But the fact that, like, building up what Cam said, like the ability to wall jump, it doesn't tell you that you can wall jump until you get to that spot. But you have that ability unlocked from the very beginning. And there's some spots where you can wall jump to get to locations, to get into areas of the game that you're technically not supposed to go to until later in the game. Get access to upgrades out of order and things like that. So I guess I didn't do any sequence breaking. I didn't really want to spend time doing that. Did any of you guys do sequence breaking?
No,
I didn't even go to Super Metroid.
I saw when I was reading through the guide, there was an option to beat Kraid before I got some other upgrade or something like that. I remember seeing that with the wall jump. And luckily for me, I was familiar with the wall jump just from Fusion, and coming back to this, like, I'd forgotten about it, and then I was like, okay, yeah, this, I remember that now. But I didn't wind up following that path.
Yeah. Matt, what about the balance in this game? Like, do you feel like the difficulty balance in this game is right? Like the bosses battles, like, are they difficult? Like, they ramp up? Like, how are you feeling about the balance in this game?
I feel now, and even I remember being 10, 11 playing this, feeling it was way too easy. I feel like you can probably get through it in what, like 4 or 5 hours tops.
Well, I was using kind of half guide, not like Cam where I was doing zero guide, and I got through it in about 5.5 hours.
Yeah, and it just feels super. It just feels. Of course you die. Of course it's easy to die, but you almost wish that there was like a difficulty slider in a game like this, because it is so fun, and a challenge would be nicer with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing I appreciated a lot with Dread, is that it was hard, because the first Metroid game was soul crushing hard, and it's kind of like it was meant to be hard, it was meant to be difficult, and the controls seem to have gotten way better with Dread. I love the controls, and the difficulty with Dread feels really, really good to me, but also I can see how it's like, my wife is never going to play this game. The people that like Mario and Mario Kart, they'll never play this game. But this one felt a bit too easy to me.
Yeah, I mean, to me it was a little bit like an RPG, which I liked RPGs in this time. Like, the learning curve is a little bit steep at first. I remember dying quite a bit at the first, but once you get your sea legs in this game, it just gets easier and easier as you go on, which actually I appreciate. I like the feeling of, at times, of feeling overpowered. But to your point, Matt, like, yeah, let me feel overpowered, let me beat the game, but then maybe it would be nice if there was like a new game plus that was harder. And of course, people, if you go on YouTube again, you can find people who are either play ROM hacks or who develop their own challenges about not getting, a lot of upgrades and beating it without that. You can build your own challenge around it if you want to. But yeah, just vanilla, it is pretty easy as you go through. Cam, let's talk bosses. What is your favorite boss in this game?
Well, my favorite boss, it has to go back with the atmospheric thing too. It's the first time you fight the Chozo statue, because you go in there and you're like, oh, here's my upgrade. It's being held by this Chozo statue like always, and then all of a sudden you find out, hey, I can't get out of this room. The thing's wrecked, and all of a sudden the Chozo statue stands up and you have to fight the Chozo statue. So the atmosphere of that, and
and that was really turning the expectations on your head, right? Because you had played through a bunch of Metroid games ahead of this, and then all of a sudden, like you said, oh well, I'm getting attacked now. So you're real,
and it's kind of scary. Like, it moves kind of janky, and it kind of plays into that horror, that B movie horror vibe that I really like about this game.
Yeah.
What about your least favorite boss?
Oh, that what Fantoon is his name? Fantoon.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like that guy.
In the wreck ship.
Yeah, he kind of like moves around, and you can't hit him. You just have to sit there and wait for him to materialize before you can hit him. It took me a while to be able. He was one of the harder ones for me for some reason. So yeah, that guy was the least fun for me at least.
What about you guys, Trevor, Matt? Do you guys have any bosses that you want to shout out, or bosses that you think are stupid?
Yeah, the Fantoon one was pretty annoying. I killed him by electrocuting him. Is that how you killed him?
No, that's not Fantoon. No. That's the other one. That's like I forget.
I did like that one though, because you had to use your
the one that grabs you and like
yeah. Which one was that one?
I had to pull it up. Let's see.
He grabs you, and then you have to shoot your grappling hook thing into the thing to electrocute him.
Yeah. Let's see.
Park's hot on it. He's
Dragon.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that was cool. And actually, I didn't know that he kept grabbing me and killing me because, like, when he grabs you, like, he takes out all your energy. And it was just kind of a freak thing that I used my energy or my grappling hook and grabbed one of the electric things to kill it. And I thought that was pretty cool that I accidentally discovered that.
I think the best mini boss for me, I did love that Chozo Bird boss. That was so smart that they did that. Yeah, you can just really tell the people that made this game really did love it. You know, like they thought a lot about it with what they had as resources. But then the very first, when you go to Brinstar, that little plant world, and that first little like mouth that moves around, it's not like the funnest boss to beat, but that was what really, really added to the atmosphere of like, oh, this is anything could happen.
It's pretty simple now, but that was like a huge sprite,
it was a
big boss. Speaking of big bosses, like Kraid is like 2 screens tall in this game, which was unheard of back at the time.
And isn't there a mini Kraid too?
Yeah.
Yes. He's
like
cute.
Just randomly.
Like right outside his lair, there's like a fake Kraid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No explanation. Don't know what that is. Don't know if they're a race. Just there's a.
Oh, and there's like a dead body.
It's very Japanese.
Dead body outside of Kraid's lair too. I don't know if you guys saw that.
That's right. Oh. Yeah.
Those 2 like guards that are out in front, like they're just like the pirates that are a different color.
Man,
I hated those guys. I didn't know how to kill them.
Screw those guys. I hated those guys.
I didn't know how to. I died like 2 or 3 times to that guy, and I'm like, I am not using a guide. So I just started jumping around and then just trying to, and then I noticed that they changed color.
Yeah. So random. Yeah.
I want to shout out my boy Crocomire. You guys remember Crocomire?
How did he become your boy?
Because you shoot him into the lava, and his skeleton comes back up after he's.
He's cool.
That was pretty cool. That was really cool, and that just plays into that horror thing again. Like when this game is doing that horror thing, when it's turning those expectations on your head in a scary way, it's at its peak, and it's awesome. Like that stuff was classic.
Yeah. I do want to put a shout out again to Mother Brain too at the end. I like that boss because it's like a cathartic boss. It's not hard. Like at that point, it's like a victory lap, right? You've done all the hard stuff. You've beat Ridley. You beat those guards, those space pirate guards that are really hard. And now you're at Mother Brain. And you know what? They just let you wail on Mother Brain, and they let you hear that awful scream sample over and over again as you're wailing on it.
That was great graphics for the time.
Oh, it was awesome.
Like that, those were amazing graphics. People don't get like how, like the best graphics you've ever seen are the best graphics you've ever seen. And at that time, that was the best that you could find.
Yeah. Love it. So, Trevor, if you were able to take any modern mechanic today that you see in games and transplant it into this game, what would you do?
So I'm gonna have 2. I'm gonna have my pipe dream one, and I'm gonna have the realistic one that I think would really add to the game. My first pipe dream one is you do have some choice as far as like where you go, some order of in which you do things. I realized today that I actually completely missed a blaster upgrade, and I had no idea. So like it's cool. Like it's cool that you have the choice and the ability to miss things. I would love to see that reflected not just in how the map is laid out, but also in how the game actually plays. If you had like an alternate way of like sneaking, I think that would be an interesting addition to this game to just add an extra layer of not only how are you approaching how you're taking the map, how are you approaching how you're taking the specific room. That would be interesting. That's a pipe dream. I understand that's not what Metroid's about. I think more realistically, something that would be really cool is how when you go into the pause screen, you've got your map, you click over to your upgrades. It'd be really cool if you could click over to like collected documents or like specimens that you've come across, alien specimens. And like, if you want, you can go into that menu and you can start reading some more of the lore. And that's there if you want it. And if you don't want it, you can just keep playing the game. I think something like that would be really interesting to just kind of have it collected for the people that really want to dive into it. They can dive into some of those, documents that you're collecting or something like that.
Oh, I like that idea because that's some of the stuff when I do play some modern games, I do like poking around the lore in like Skyrim or whatever that you don't have to. And that's something you're right. You could realistically see if they ever do a remaster of this game, they could easily bring that in. I know we've kind of been skirting around this, Matt, and so we know that you're going to say that you like the graphics, but like realistically, how does it, like if you were to take nostalgia out of it, how do the graphics hold up today? Especially let's first focus on, actually instead of talking about how does it hold up today, let's compare it to other Super Nintendo and 16-bit games. How did it compare against its peers?
So for the peer group, this was as good as it gets because you have to remember that like the only way to make the graphics better for the Super Nintendo is you would get like an extra chip that would be on the game, like Star Fox. And that was like that was, some people would say Star Fox, and I've heard that Yoshi's Island, Mario 2, is like the most graphically demanding Super Nintendo game. So it's like good to benchmark. But this peer group was like, I mean, there were shadows, there was volumetric fog. Like I mentioned Mother Brain, but then like, I mean, gosh, you really thought this was awesome at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with you. Like maybe you can find some games that are better in some aspects, but as far as this is right at the top of all 16-bit games. And not just because, it's a late game. It didn't have, at least I don't think it had any of those special chips in it, but just the art design in the game is top notch. Well, let's follow on that question and let's talk about how it holds up today. Again, remove nostalgia, remove any limitations it had. Like, does it still stand up today?
I say absolutely it does. It's, I wouldn't be afraid to show this to anybody and say, look how cool this game is. Just look at it. The colors are great. If you play this on an upscaler on a big TV like we did that other night when I hooked my dock up to the HD TV, you can see all the individual pixels and the colors and how great it still looks if you play it properly. And it's an aesthetic that still is used today on games that are indie games, and I think it's incredibly well done.
Yeah,
like it's great.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I was not held back by the graphics at all. I didn't think that it was an eyesore. In fact, like Cam said, like a lot of games kind of ape this style, and it's still a cool retro style. A lot of indie games will use it. I just pulled up some pictures of Metroid Dread. I haven't played it. I've seen somebody play it, and Clark's told me a little bit about it. And although the skin has changed in Metroid Dread, of course, it's maybe more realistic, if that's the right word. It's still borrowing on the style. it doesn't feel like you're taking a step back at all to play this game graphically in my mind.
Yeah. What an amazing game.
I played it on Steam Deck on RetroArch, and it looked great. But also, like, all these indie games are, you can go on Steam and buy a game that's a brand new Metroidvania made in 2023 or 4, and it'll look just like it because it's like all paying homage to it. And with those side scrollers, it doesn't. That's not what makes it fun. It's not like a Resident Evil or something where the graphics really are part of the immersion. It's You can make really immersive, like 8-bit style retro games in 2024, and they're still really cool.
Yeah, it's all about the art design, right? And the art design in this game is top notch. There's really not a lot of better games when it comes to art design out there. So, Trevor, I want to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Go ahead.
I don't know who said it just a second ago, but that you could tell the love of the developers how they put in this game. You see it with the graphic design too. It's obvious that every world that you go to, every character is very lovingly curated.
Well, even speaking about the minute details, like if you just like stop and look at Samus, you can like see Samus breathing, like in her animations. It's so awesome. And like that dead body I was talking about outside the crate, like you approach it and like bugs scatter as you get close to it. Or even the details about when Crocomire, you put him in the lava and then you run the other way and he pops up behind you. If you watch carefully, you can see bubbles under the lava going like fast the other direction of him coming.
That's cool.
Coming up. And so just little tiny details like that. Like they didn't skimp on those details.
Well, one of my favorite things that like blew my mind as a kid is when you get that super bomb and you go back through the tube that's in the water and you just sit and like, oh, that'd be cool if I could blow this tube up. And then you do the super bomb and it shatters the glass. That was crazy.
Yeah.
That was so awesome.
That is cool. That was cool.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that like environmental storytelling can tell you that, because on another screen, not too far from that screen, you see one of those canisters that's broken, right? And so you can kind of infer from the background that, hey, like this can happen, but it doesn't explicitly tell you, which is so cool. I just love that in games.
That's probably like one of the first destructible environments that was done right.
Yeah.
That was one of the spots where I got stuck for a while. It took me a while to realize I could super bomb that.
Yeah.
So, because I didn't have a guide.
Trevor, in 5 years, let's say that you're approached by someone who asks you about this game. What is it that stands out most about this game in 5 years when you're telling someone about this game?
I think the thing that'll stick with me is how atmospheric they were able to make a game in this generation at this time. And I think that will always be the case. I think it worked then, it works now, and I think in 5 years it'll still be a really cool thing to at least turn on and see that opening sequence. Like that, I think that'll always be really cool because the atmosphere is there, and that atmosphere is timeless.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey Matt, do we ever see a remake of this game?
The way that Nintendo is, I could see them just adding texture packs to it or something, making it part of a paywall of an online Switch thing with Switch 2. Like, it's the frustrating thing to be a Nintendo fan, because like, we don't want to pirate your games. We want to buy them the way that just let us buy your games. It's like that. What's that meme where it's like, shut up and take my money? It's like you're just dying to give them the money, but they won't like let you have it. And so I bet that they would do a 4K upscaled Nintendo version, like a normie remake for people that really don't know. But I can't see them like starting from scratch, because Metroid Dread was kind of like it was kind of like the spiritual successor to it.
Yeah. Do you think that they would bastardize this game and do something like Mario 35 or something, where it's like not a full remake, but they do like, I don't know, mini challenges in the game where you're running through the game with like 35 other hunters or something.
I would hate that.
That would be such a Nintendo thing to do.
Yeah, it would be Nintendo to right after, and there was some real stinker Metroid games they made after this. Like they did great ones on the handheld, like Fusion, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but they made one called Other M that is like so
The Wii
cringy.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. Like everybody hate. It's like everybody.
They took
hates that.
everything that was good.
I've heard about it, how bad it is.
Yeah, I haven't played it, but it sounds like they did all of the things that we liked about this game and just did the opposite. Like they basically like tell everything through a story explicitly to you.
Yep.
They take someone who's
Samus like won't shut up. She's got her helmet off all the time, talking
she has like
all sorts of dramatic
doesn't
stuff.
she have like PTSD in this game, which is like total opposite of her character. Like she's supposed to be a badass. She's supposed to be able to go handle everything.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, as a 10-year-old, to have a death animation like that where you're like, that's a hot blonde in that suit. That was pretty awesome at the time. It really was a big deal. Like, that was the prettiest girl in video games until Mortal Kombat had Sonya Blade.
I do have to say the death animation is one of the best death animations.
Did you guys?
It's good.
I can't even remember what the technique is called. There's this really like corner technique that you can do in this game with super bombs to refill your energy. Have you seen that?
No.
Is it the thing that they show on the demo screen?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, they show.
Yeah, they show.
I can't remember exactly how to do it. I don't think it's too hard, but you can basically trade all of your like super bombs to refill your health back up. And there's an animation kind of like that. Like you see Samus sort of sitting in her cocoon with this energy around her, and it's really cool. You should look it up.
That's awesome.
Well, we have to get to this point. For as much as we've been praising this game, it's not a perfect game. So let's do a contrarian corner here for a little bit. And we'll do a little bit of an open mic here. What problems do you guys have with this game?
I kind of already touched on this about how I didn't feel like the upgrades really added to my experience with the gameplay. It just kind of opened different areas to go to. I really felt like that middle 50 to 75% of the game was kind of a slog for me. Because at that point, like I had already experienced all the atmosphere that I was going to experience until the very end. I knew at that point I was just kind of waiting, trying to find upgrades to get to the next area. So for me, that middle half to 3/4 of the game, I didn't really enjoy it. I wasn't having a lot of fun. I was really waiting for that end sequence, knowing that Metroid has cool ending sequence. So that was what kept me driving on. But yeah, I thought that middle part was a little bit of a slog.
Yeah, I think it can be when you get lost in the minutia and maybe lost in the world. It can get bogged down a little bit there, and I think I got fatigued a little bit with that too.
I think it's too short, too easy, not enough enemies. It's like I don't know if they couldn't put more in, but there's a lot of empty space. It'd be fun to like have more enemies and all missiles and bombs more.
Yeah, it feels like the expectation is that like you're gonna fill your time searching for the upgrades, rocket upgrades, and power bomb upgrades. And I just don't enjoy that sort of thing in modern games or old games. I was telling Clark today, I think my completion rate was like 53%. I don't know. That wasn't very good. I wasn't looking for anything. In fact, I tried to avoid things. I was like, this is annoying. I don't like looking for this sort of thing.
Well, and to just build off that, Trev, like, gotta remember, like, this game was designed, and that doesn't excuse it today. We're looking at it, how good it is today, so it's a negative today, but that was a positive back then. When Matt said he only had 4 games, right? So when he got this game, he had to get the most out of this game. So when you beat it the first time, Matt, you probably had a pretty similar item completion, but that gave you something to shoot for the next time that you ran through it. So increase the replayability of the game.
So a lot of my gripes have a lot to do with just stuff that could be easily like fixed in a remake. It's the wall jumping, some of the mechanics of the stuff. I even found when you're doing your screw attack and you're jumping around that sometimes it's not as responsive as you want it to be, and you'll get jumping and then all of a sudden like you're still pressing the button, but it still falls down to the bottom. There's just a few of the platforming things that were just a little frustrating. So a little bit with the grappling hook too. Sometimes you feel like you've got a good grappling hook and then you just miss it and you fall, and just a little minor gripes about some of the aspects of the gameplay.
Yeah. I have two major gripes with this game. I'll save the worst one for last. The one gripe that I do like I want to surface here is the button layout, at least the default. I know you can switch it around, but I don't think anything can really fix this. I think that maybe if you had a default run on, I hated trying to run, shoot, and jump all at the same time.
Yeah.
Because this is, like, you couldn't really contort my thumb to hit all those three buttons very gracefully at all. And so I have...
And God forbid you had to change weapon. If that happened, you're just going to explode at that point.
Yeah. They should have just had like some sort of like analog auto run so that you didn't have to worry about hitting a run button. Would have been so much better.
Nintendo does love its weird control schemes. And today, changing weapons is usually the D-pad, but back then, that's all it was to control it.
Yeah.
It's select.
I have no idea what you're talking about when you say weird control schemes. The Nintendo 64 controller was very normal for people with 3 arms.
Yes. Oh, that was...
It was so terrible, man. It was so bad. It made video games suck. Well, Trevor, since you're young, you should look into the Virtual Boy, which came after the N64. And that is like the biggest failure in video games for Nintendo.
I've heard legends and tales of the Virtual Boy. That would be... You guys should get a Virtual Boy. We should find a Virtual Boy sometime.
Well, I've seen it.
I saw one for sale at the last retro game convention we were at, and I was tempted.
How much was it?
They wanted like $350 or something for it, but one of the ribbon cables wasn't good, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to repair this thing.
I saw a guy on YouTube that took a real one and turned it into a handheld.
Oh.
With like a real regular screen. Like he was like one of these evil geniuses on YouTube that did it. But there's some really fun games on it. But it was like, okay, this is the cocaine era of Nintendo. You guys are all on cocaine now. You're trying to be so weird. This is bad.
Yeah.
The Super Nintendo controller, though, is one of the best controllers ever. It really innovated.
You can still see its influence today on controller design.
Those shoulder buttons were a big deal back then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
played a lot of mine on
last big gripe I have with this game is quicksand. Man, screw that quicksand. Like I still don't understand the physics of being in that quicksand because I was there in Meridia, is that where it's at? I got there early and I didn't have like the space jump, so like getting through that area was a nightmare. And then you get cut in this quicksand, and then trying to figure out the physics of how to jump out of that, like you never figure it out. Like I would be jumping fast and then jumping slow, jumping at a rhythm, and like
bombing your way out.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I remember I fell through the sand at one point, and I was like, screw that. I'm at the bottom. I went back to a save state like 20 minutes prior just because I was like, I'm not going to deal with this.
Yeah, it's so bad. You think you can just like die, but then you realize you're living in it, and then you have
it's like worse. I want to die.
All right, we're back. We're ready to. We've talked around the subject a little bit, but we want to dive a little bit into the music. Music is one of the things I love about old video games, and so I want to sort of pick that up, take a look at it, experience it here, share it with you guys on the podcast. So what I've done is I've asked the panel here to pick some of their favorite tunes of this game. We'll play it and we'll describe it and we'll talk about why we like those songs. Matt, let's start with you. Which song do you want to talk about?
So it's the opening theme, and it's not just the opening theme of this game. This is kind of a variation always of an opening theme for every Metroid game, including like all the way to Metroid Dread, which I have as a ringtone on my phone because I like it so much. But this was the very first thing that you hear when you see what's playing behind Cam, and then as soon as you hit the start button, that's what came in right there. So cool! It's still so cool.
It is really cool.
Yes.
Like I would listen to 8-hour looped lo-fi versions of this on YouTube.
This is sweet.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's still good.
It's so moody, and like just that the original, or like the way it starts with just those beeps, it's like a heartbeat, right? Or like an EKG machine or something like that. You know that something creepy is going on, right?
And like compare this to the themes of everything else that was in Super Nintendo back then. Star Fox, Super Mario, Zelda. This is a totally different thing. The theme on Metroid has always been cool like this.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, Trev, let's go to you next. Which one did you want to pick up and talk about?
I wanted the opening theme, but I'm gonna go for a deep cut here. I'm gonna go to Wrecked Ship.
Okay.
So this part of the game I thought was awesome. It really leaned into that horror aspect that I've been talking about for a while. You go into the wrecked ship. One of the enemies that's like attacking you is like this bundle of skulls. It's really cool. This music I thought fit it perfectly. It sounds like something once again you'd hear on like a low budget horror film that people would go to the theaters and watch Halloween. I like it. I think it's awesome. It's something that it has a place today. You know, like you could hear music like this in something today. I feel like just like that awesome like retro synth sound. It's kind of low budget, but it's like perfect. You know?
Yeah, and this is so different than almost everything on this soundtrack, right? Like, and that sort of like that area fits that area so well because that wrecked ship is so different. So I like that this one switches things up, and like as soon as you go into the wreck ship and you hear this music, you'll be like, well, what's going on here? Like, this is different.
Mm-hmm. I love all the moody music. Yeah, we just listened to the opening. As moody as it gets, this to me is in the same vein.
Yeah, good stuff. All right,
Great and understated.
yeah, Cam, let's pick up yours. Which one did you want to do?
Let's go with the Meridia Rocky underwater area. So if when you listen to this, try to listen to it through headphones because you get the stereo effect on this one, and it's kind of like the other tracks on that we've listened to. It's very atmospheric and creepy, and it's a little more melodious, and it gives you that ambiance of the creepiness and everything that's going on in the game.
Yeah, and it has like that underwater kind of vibe to it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the...
And I just love the stereo to
Yeah.
it. It's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it's really cool.
If it wasn't for the quicksand, I would love it even more, but I think I was getting frustrated with the quicksand when this was playing. Oh, I like that too.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. I am going to do Brinstar overflowing with vegetation area.
They could have nailed that name better.
I know.
It's pretty cool.
This is really...
I'm pretty sure they played this song in Terminator 1.
I like it because it's a little bit more upbeat. Like, the point where this plays in the game, you're kind of getting your footing, and you're more explorative, and you're starting to power up, and things aren't quite as mysterious at this time. And I think that this song shifts the tone a little bit to to something a little bit more optimistic. And I like when the beat really starts picking up here.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I really like that synth bass they got going on.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Did you play Lower Brinstar?
No, let's
Let's listen to Lower Brinstar. I remember this being pretty cool too. There's like metal YouTube remakes of these songs too. Like people that are really talented will take electric guitars
yeah.
and they'll like make really cool versions of this.
Yeah, we did a shorter podcast where we ranked some of the games and we put on some of those remakes, those YouTube covers of some of those NES games. They're so cool.
This is kind of like your first level outside of like when you start to really get to exploring where that like little bosses, that little mouth bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of like it's good for the area.
Yeah, so good. Well, I know we've all kind of picked
Music's top notch.
Yeah.
Top notch.
We've all picked out a track or two here, but is there any other shout outs you guys want to do here?
I can't believe nobody chose Mother Brain.
Well, let's do it.
That's
Well,
pretty.
and I think even part of the song is like they get the like I'm just unloading on her with missiles, right?
Yeah.
Well, she's got that gross like drool coming out of her mouth.
It's not quite the same without that synthesized scream that she does as you're shooting her.
So I will
I'm
say.
not sure if oh, sorry. Go ahead, Trevor.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. I've been dabbling with some of like the retro chiptune sounding synth effects. I've been just making some of that music, and I really appreciate that they were able to execute this. It's grating on the nerves, but it's not like so annoying that you're gonna turn off the volume. It's impressive. I think they struck a really good balance with this one.
Clark, do they have the track for the actual opening, like where it's showing the epilogue? Because that was really good music too.
This one's one that you should listen to with headphones as well.
This is it. This is the track. This is so cool.
Yeah, it's got like that, not a choir, but it sounds a little bit like a sampled choir in the background. It's so good. And it goes from
You're like
left.
seeing like a really dramatic like comic book style.
Yeah, and when the choir's going there, you hear it from the left ear to the right ear. It's so good.
And then you also have that tune that we just. This tune's part of another.
I think
song,
it's
right?
part of Samus's theme.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we chose a couple of them. It just shows you we didn't pick these ones out at first, but man, this is just amazing.
It's really good.
Yeah, we could keep going. Just a finer point on it. Some of the tracks that you wouldn't think of as music, it's just literally atmosphere and like a whirring sound or like a beep here and there or like some of it is not really a song, but it's still a track that really adds to it.
Before we move into ranking the game, is there any miscellaneous thoughts that you guys have? We've picked out a lot of the threads here. Is there anything that you want to dive a little bit deeper on or something that we missed?
I think we mainly hit on it. I mean, we never really talked about like the story, like what happens in the story. Like we talked about how they tell this story, but I'm not sure if we really need to go on and talk about how you find your baby Metroid, but it's a big Metroid now, and then it's your friend, and it doesn't kill you, and then kills Mother Brain, then it dies. But
Sad.
Another
and that's the
3-minute
story.
timer.
That's the story.
It is a simple story, and I do like that.
It doesn't need to be anything like groundbreaking. I remember being like captivated by that when I watched. I can't remember if it was Tim or Weston that I saw beat this game, but when I saw the baby Metroid swoop in there at the end, and I was able to connect it to Metroid 2, a game that I had beat on the Game Boy, I'm like, oh, this is really cool that they kept this thread going here and they brought it back, and Even that whole area
Well-
area where you like the Metroid's sucking the life out of you, and you can just tell when it realizes who you are and it lets you go. Like that's all just effective storytelling, right?
Yeah, it's like those stories of like the people that rescue like a bear or a lion and they go back to visit at the zoo and it like recognizes it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it tells the story well. I think it's pretty cool.
Well, let's bring this baby home. So one of the things we do at the end of each of the podcasts is we have sort of the traditional tier ranking system. So, S, A, B, C, D, F. We also put a number in there so that we can sort of average out our grade and we can figure out what this panel thinks of it and put our final stamp on it. So, for instance, S. An S would be a game that is still, if it was released today, brand new, it would be one of the best games of the year if it came out today. An A rank would be, nostalgia helps carry it today, but it's still an all-time great and fun to play. Didn't mention this, but that would be worth 5. B, or 4 rank, it's still a fun game to play, but it would not separate itself from the pack in the modern game landscape. C, or a 3, is it's fun to play for 10 minutes and then you move on. A lot of retro games are like that. D rank, or 2, is nostalgia alone is not enough to get you to turn the game on. Like you have to be forced to, like Trevor is for this podcast, to turn on Parasite Eve, right?
It's a chore.
Yeah.
It's a job. It's a job.
And finally, an F rank is not only is the game not good today, it never was good. It wasn't even good back then. So let's roll out the carpet here. Matt, you're our guest here for the first time. How would you rank Super Metroid today?
I would rank it a 5, and that is to say that there is a ton of nostalgia from this. It's evident by like people remaking it and adding to it, and I mean people just can't get enough of it. Still, there is still that cult classic. I'm sure they're all 40 like us, but it is still a really fun game to play. It still holds up as a fun Metroidvania, and that may sound like a no big deal, but this is a game from 1994. And to your point, Clark, there is some really crappy games from back then. I mean, when you get into emulation, and you're really excited at first because you're like, I have the entire Nintendo catalog right here, and you get into it, and it's 80% crap.
Yeah.
I mean, if a movie came out back then, it got a video game on Nintendo, and it was just like hurry and get it through, crap games. So for this to still really be legitimately fun, and like in 2000, and like that's a long time ago for this to still be really fun.
Yeah. Love the comments. Cam, let's do you next.
Okay, well, I'm giving it a 5.25 because,
Oh,
yeah, I think this game holds up today, and not only holds up today, it would be a really, really good game today. If there was just a couple of quality of life upgrades to like the map and some of the mechanics and stuff like that, I still think this could be a contender for a game of the year today. I think there's a reason why people will have this as the best game of all time. Some people will have it up there in their top 10, top 15, and I have nostalgia for this game, but it was more secondhand nostalgia. Me playing through it for this first time, all the way through, I loved it. I love the ambiance of this game, the setting. I just love it, and I think it deserves everyone's attention. And if you haven't played this game and you're listening to this podcast, I implore you, go play this game. It's fun, and you need to give it a shot.
Awesome. T, where do you land?
yeah. So I find I do usually trend a little bit lower. That said, I will say I agree with Cam. I think that people should play this game. I flirted with a 4.5. I decided on a 4, and the reason is I thought in my mind if Super Metroid came out right now today, what would people think? And I don't think people would think a lot. I think it's fun. I do think the gameplay holds up. I think the atmosphere is cool. The soundtrack is cool. I don't think it would separate itself today. That said, like I said, I agree with Cam. I think that people should play it, especially if you have played any of the other Metroid games. You can see this is where the Metroid thing really got its legs. This is where Metroid became what Metroid is today.
Perfect. My turn to give my grade. I'm going to land at a solid 5, right there with Matt. I agree with everything that's been said. I think that, building off of what Trevor said, like, nostalgia is a little bit of it. Like, there's no doubt about it. Nostalgia carries this game a little bit. But man, everything is just so strong in this game, and it still shines past its limitations and to be a timeless game. So if you are a fan of old games, of Nintendo's history, not just Metroid, like if you're a fan of video games and histories, do yourself a favor, boot this up. Whether you use a guide or not, it doesn't matter. Don't feel guilty if you use a guide. Play through this game. There'll be some warts. We've talked about those warts here. Be aware of that. But man, just soak in the atmosphere, soak in the art direction, soak in the bosses. It is amazing. So yes, play this game today. So with that being said, we are just barely under 5 on our combined rankings. So for this game, so we'll just say 5. A good great game. Really appreciate you guys joining us for this panel. Really just enjoyed this discussion. With that being said, TwinCast is out.
Woo!
Did you ever play Double Dribble?
Double dribble.
Yeah. Double.
That's all it was.
It went double dwibble.
That was it.
I have no idea what you're talking about when you say weird control screens. The Nintendo 64 controller was very normal for people with 3 arms.